The Greens have asked the government to dump almost $2 billion of spending that was due to be used on fossil fuel projects. Handouts promised under the former coalition government, mostly as part of the so-called gas-led recovery, but that money has not yet been contracted. They include $600 million for a gas plant at Kurri Kurri, $300 million for an LNG project and $23 million for gas drilling grants in the Beetaloo Basin. The Greens say these funds should be redirected away from fossil fuels and toward renewables. Joining me live in the studio is the Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young. Thanks very much for your time. So where was this analysis done?
Well, this analysis was done by the Parliamentary Budget Office, and they've gone through to find out of the fossil fuel subsidies that exist in the current budget, what money hasn't been contracted. So it may have been promised in the budget, but it's able to be removed without any problems. And we've come up with $2 billion, promised by Mr Morrison at a time, as you said, when he was spruiking a gas-led recovery out of the pandemic. He promised the money, but it hasn't actually been committed. $2 billion.
It hasn't been contracted.
It hasn't been contracted.
So it doesn't raise a question of sovereign risk if it were to be
No, it
cancelled.
doesn't raise a question of sovereign risk, but what it does raise a question of, if it remains there, is why are we continuing at a time when we're hearing the current government, the new government, talking about budget repair, waste, looking, they were going to line by line go through and get rid of the waste. Well, here is $2 billion that the Greens have found, thanks to the hard work of the Parliamentary Budget Office. $2 billion, which is currently being wasted. Let's put it into the projects that we know we need to transition to a clean, green, renewable future, which of course will also drive prices down for households, because the cheaper we make renewable energy, the cheaper household bills are going to be.
Do you have any sense of hope that Labor might get on board with these cuts? Particularly, I think of the Kurri Kurri project, which Labor has said they're going to back.
Well, the thing here is how much of this money, taxpayers' money, should be being spent on these projects. And I would argue, and don't just have to take my word for it, the International Energy Agency, the UN, other countries around the world are saying, in this transition that we know we need to move away from fossil fuels, one of the first things governments should be doing is not spending taxpayers' money and public money. No public money should be going towards new coal and gas. So, fine if Labor wants to continue backing the Kurri Kurri project, but don't spend taxpayers' money.
Ted O'Brien, the coalition spokesperson, says the projects that you're talking about are designed in part to fortify energy security as the government, the former government, was pursuing lower emission technologies. Isn't that energy security also important?
They like to have their cake and eat it too, the coalition. They say, oh, here's a big bucket of money, we need this to create security here, but then they don't go and spend it. So hang on a minute, what's really going on here? This is taxpayers' money. We are in a process of budget repair. We've got to move away from dirty fossil fuels. We shouldn't be spending any more money on this. If these corporations and these companies want to sink their own money and their shareholders' money into more polluting projects, well, they should take the risk. It shouldn't be Australian taxpayers.
The Minister for Resources, Madeleine King, has also said that, and others in the Labor government, that they support opening up further gas fields and projects if they pass appropriate environmental tests.
And that is that's a big question.
How much does that concern you then?
Well, it concerns me a lot that on one hand we have the Labor government who says they're serious about climate change. We've just spent, of course, the last couple of weeks in Parliament getting the 43% emission target bill passed. Thankfully, the Greens and others were able to increase and strengthen that bill, but it's done. If you're serious about climate change, then you have to stop making climate change worse. You can't keep opening up more coal and gas.
You do accept that gas is an important interim energy source, isn't it? For stability of the system.
What I'm looking at is where things are going around the world. We have plenty of gas in Australia right now. Any more opening up of new coal or gas, it's not going to be used here in Australia. It's going to go straight offshore. The profits for most of this goes off to foreign companies, so Australians aren't even getting the benefit of the taxes from this, and it makes climate change worse. Now, we are heading into another disastrous summer of extreme weather and flooding. Australians are sick and tired of being told, on one hand, yes, climate change is here, but on the other hand, it's too hard to do anything about it.
We're talking about the fossil fuel subsidies. We've also seen a massive increase in the amount of renewables in our system, but around the world in the last couple of years. When should subsidies end for renewables?
I think what we've seen here in Australia, at least, is actually a lot of the renewable energy industry has had to kind of struggle on through with this kind of boom-bust commitment because there's been no stability and security and a consistent policy framework. If we just put in place the policy framework that is consistent, we know this is where we need to get. We need to get to net zero. We need to reduce pollution and stop making it harder for renewables by subsidising the polluting industries like coal and gas, then actually renewables are going to be pretty well off. And Australians are already reaping the benefits. Those who have been able to put solar panels on their roofs know their power bills are decreased dramatically. If we can start electrifying everything, helping households get off gas and onto electric appliances, getting out of their petrol cars and getting affordable electric vehicles, we will be able to save households thousands of dollars a year.
We mentioned the $50 billion boost to the bottom line, largely from commodity exports, in part that's gas, obviously one of those commodities. We need to fund our budget in some way. Do you accept that a lot of that money will be being spent on the social goods?
Well, you can't just pick and choose with these things. And what we've got is a budget that is looking to be handed down in October that has hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts to Australia's most wealthiest. That's under the stage 3 tax cuts. We're worried about cost of living pressures. Come on, come on, Labor. Let's junk that. Everyone knows that that is a drain on the budget, a drain on revenue coming in to the government. That money could be spent on other things. Talk about cost of living pressures. Let's make childcare free and actually save households hundreds of dollars a week.
Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran.